Democrats, be careful what you wish for. Former Obama advisor David Axelrod getting mocked over a clueless tweet that laments how some far-right candidates won after a key primary last night, saying, quote, "Another far-right election denier wins, this time in New Hampshire. Feels like the Republicans are doing everything possible to frustrate their chances of regaining control of the Senate." But maybe David should check with his fellow Democrats because they've been spending millions in campaign ads to boost those MAGA Republican candidates and bury the moderates. So much for that threat to democracy. And Elizabeth Warren basically couldn't answer when called out on it.
I think this is just extraordinarily dangerous. I am so deeply disturbed that there are still so many MAGA Republicans.
So why are Democrats supporting and pouring money into their campaigns?
Look, I believe that these folks are very, very dangerous.
She said. All right, Greg, you know what? They're spending something like $53 million, the Democrats, on these MAGA candidates, pushing out the more moderate Republicans and then criticizing them and saying they're a threat to democracy, but like raising them on a pedestal. What's going on?
I'm beginning to think they really don't mean what they're saying.
Gee.
I don't know, but I mean, like, I think trying to win an election is more important than avoiding the greatest existential threat since the Civil War. Tells me maybe they might have been exaggerating. And it also shows how little faith they have in their candidates, that they would shift their energies to the other candidates rather than try to, like, figure out who their best person is. The other thing is, as I shuffle for my notes, I am curious, why is this election meddling somehow less worse than the Russians spending, what was it, 100 grand on Facebook ads? Was that what it was that ended up doing nothing? I mean, isn't there some principle here? Like, so it's okay if we meddle, but somebody else can't buy ads? This is 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. This is an existential threat to our election system, and it exposes their extreme MAGA grift. This is why we need the media, an actual objective media, because if they were so terrified of these monsters, right, why are they trying to help them win? A media would actually go crazy on this story. Imagine if I'm going to say we as a Republican, even though I'm a registered independent, or I think I am, I don't know, I forgot. What if we decided that we would amplify the socialists in the Democratic Party?
You do.
I don't spend any money.
Yeah,
I don't support any socialists. But imagine if we did that. The media would go crazy if they found out, like, Fox was sending money to support socialists. Anyway, but we don't do that because we're better people.
Okay, Jesse, isn't this about the Democrats having nothing to talk about, and instead they're trying to make Donald Trump the centerpiece and the person that they can focus everyone on so that they don't have to talk about what a mess our economy's in?
You explained it perfectly.
Thank
I don't have to add anything to that. And Greg is right. We are better people, but we lose.
Yeah.
we show up with a knife to a gunfight, but we lose with honor. We should take notes and maybe start funneling money to the squad types in the Dem primaries so we can knock them off easier in the general. Greg also said something very smart yesterday, and it's so rare it stuck out. I remembered it. He said it seems like the Democrats want it more because they'll do anything to stay in power. So I'm not even worried about this, what they're doing here with these primaries. This is small ball. Look what they did in the last election. They pushed the Pfizer deal back after the election to hurt Trump. People probably died because of that. They brought the CIA into the last election to lie in that letter about the laptop. They blew up all the election laws, got rid of voter ID, pushed out the signature requirements. Look at another election. I mean, they covered up Benghazi, a terror attack, so they could win. They turned the IRS against the Tea Party. What was the last time, I think, Joe Biden said Republicans want to make blacks slaves again? And now he's calling us all fascists. Didn't he just raid the Treasury to bribe his voters before a midterm? I mean, this guy raids, they lie, they illegally leak. Come on, Judge. I mean, this is the least of my... At least what they're doing here is legal.
Yeah,
I'm not
okay.
worried about their hypocrisy. I'm worried about their skullduggery.
Skullduggery. Now, there's a word for you.
Skullduggery.
Yes.
All right, Dana, I'm fascinated by this guy, Don Bolduc, who won over, okay, he's a Trumper, apparently, or certainly a right-winger that the Democrats apparently supported. But he won over Mitch McConnell's candidate. And so the question is, you know, as we see this across the country, I mean, who's going to win in these races?
Well, this is really interesting. So the race was very close. It was like 36.8 to 36.1. So the Democrats' effort helped him get over the finish line. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, he was outspent by a lot. He only had like $70,000 in his account or something. But mark my words, he could still win. Maggie Hassan's record in the Senate is horrendous. She has no legislative record. She votes with Chuck Schumer 100% of the time. And immediately, what did they do today? As soon as Chuck Morse conceded, and General Bolduc is now going to be the candidate, the first thing they did was say, he's so extreme. Oh my gosh, what will happen to the world? Now, if the Democratic National Committee is not worried about Bolduc being one election night away from the Senate, why should voters? And the other thing I would point out is that could be a concern is that abortion is like a 70-30 issue in that state. That was the first ad that they ran. What they said is that he's extreme on abortion. So Bolduc's already commenting on that. But I would point out this. He started as a private in the Army, worked his way up to be a general, rode horseback across Afghanistan. His voters in New Hampshire would walk across coals for him. He held 50 town halls. He was out there and about. It's a small state. It's an independent state. And I think that the Democrats, they are probably going to get what they asked for, which is Bolduc in the Senate. Yeah,
that's interesting. And, you know, Jessica, the majority of Americans who listened to Biden's speech, where it was the anti-MAGA speech, they found it, 60%, they found it to be divisive. That, along with this kind of perplexing, they're promoting the right-wing MAGA, that the anti-democratic candidates, you know, people have to wonder in the Democrat Party what they really are doing.
Well, we certainly know what Joe Biden was doing, and he was clarifying that there's a subset of the Republican Party, and it's just a piece of it. It's certainly not the totality that doesn't believe in the institutions that we believe in, that doesn't adhere to democratic norms, that doesn't accept reality.
What institutions that we believe in?
Like elections, like voting and then certifying elections. I mean, he was talking about people that wanted to hang Mike Pence for not doing the president's bidding and overturning the election. So that's what Joe Biden was talking about.
You can't have an opinion on an election. That you can't be a skeptic, or else you're a terrorist.
No.
Yeah, and then the whole
I'm
party
sorry.
is that.
I began with, and I returned to, he was talking about a small subset of Republicans, and he's, for a week, been reminding you that he clarified that, and he continues to clarify it. He works with Republicans. He got gun control done and infrastructure done with Republicans. He made good on those promises that he can work with Republicans who believe in the same kinds of things that we do, which includes election integrity. To the point about supporting these candidates, I've not been in favor of it. If even one of these people wins their election, it obviously invalidates the entire strategy, and it's incredibly scary because one of these elections could be a Carrie Lake. It could be Doug Mastriano.
She is going to win. I agree.
She's great.
Well,
in Arizona.
She's great.
She's great.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you say that sarcastically, but you have no evidence on why she isn't. I think she's incredibly persuasive. Carrie Lake, we're talking about the same person, right? Running for
Governor in
Governor
Arizona.
exactly.
Arizona.
You're acting like she
Someone
is a
who doesn't
monster.
affirm that-
No, but you're acting
Well,
like she's a monster or something.
I do think people who don't function in the same reality that the rest of us do, where Joe Biden is the legitimate president of the United States of America.
You know, Hillary Clinton did that for 4 years.
exactly.
No,
Okay.
Actually, she conceded and gave her concession
Oh,
speech.
she did.
What?
And then she
Oh,
continued to complain.
to say-
and
what?
then the Russians were involved. But in any event,
The
as
Russians
crime
were
rocks
involved.
liberal cities, a startling number of residents are now victims.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.